budget hearing. And I'm not sure if it was just logistics, and then later we'll talk about the budget. Okay. Do I need to call it to order again? Okay, I'd like to call to order the Sherborn School Committee at 6:35. First order of business is to discuss the Sherborn Public Schools budget hearing. And I didn't know, is this logistics, and then we'll talk about those more specifics with the budget later, or?
Well, I think as a public hearing, we perhaps should do a walkthrough, but there were some items that I had said to school committee I would research further, and I wanted to share with you what has happened with that.
Okay.
You know, we have been trying to get some confirmed information from the Department of Education regarding the sequester and the impact it's had on the local school system. We still have not gotten that. What we did get was a pretty clear printout as to what the federal breakdown was going to be. And we had had that before, but we, not having had our state information, were a little bit hesitant. One of the areas that I was looking in hopes of being able to find some resources to supplement some of the reduced hours that we had brought forward was embedded in Title I. Title I is one of the grants that has been identified by the federal government as looking at reductions of a significant amount. That is on a national scale. I don't know what will come into our state and local when the formulas are recalculated and when we're able to get some information. Within the budget, there is not an allocation for additional state funding. My hope is that we would be receiving additional state funding in some capacity. I don't know and don't have any idea what the state may be able to provide, but I would imagine that they're going to do what they can. At best, that is what I can share with the school committee, is that depending upon what we have with Title I, depending upon what we have with the state funding, at that time I would revisit this and would also bring back to school committee any changes that I would be able to make to be able to support that individual.
So, what's the timing on that? I mean, we have to have the budget kind of wrapped up in the next couple
Susan,
weeks.
we have to move on our budget. I mean, we have to approve the budget tonight. My hands are tied on that. I have to approve the regional budget tomorrow morning. It's part of the most frustrating thing that I have gone through, is having to bring forth a budget and not having the concrete information on which we build our budgets. Our grants, Steve is in a complete holding pattern because many of our grants have been identified. The one area that I feel pretty solid on is the preschool, because Terry has already structured the preschool in a way that we can sustain a reduction in that particular area. The rest of them, I really have to wait and see, and I don't know when they're going to let us know. You know, we've made requests. We've received, you know, the famous cherry sheet, which gives us the figure on which we're supposed to build our budget. Quite frankly, with the figures that were embedded in that cherry sheet in the direction that we have had, the sequester followed it very quickly. I think it was maybe a 2-week period of time, which I think it would be fiscally irresponsible to have followed the figures that I was originally given at this time. So as soon as we get word from the state, as soon as I get any information, we will immediately notify the school committee.
I was just wondering if when we set our budget and we set it the way that we've discussed recently, and then we get funding later, how do you change that if we, you know, reduce
You wanna
person?
address that? Okay. Christine has whispered that she'd like to address that, so Christine Tagg.
Thank you. The way, basically, town meeting, you would go to town meeting, if this budget were approved, that would be your bottom line. You could not exceed that, even if additional general fund revenue came in. If funding comes in through some of the grants, federal grants, you could utilize those funds to support other increases. Other than, if you want to utilize those fundings, that funding for, then Chapter 70, if it were to come in, that would require additional appropriation from town meeting. Because your bottom line would have to increase in order to exceed the bottom line that is voted tonight.
Right, so,
Now, if that funding, or if we receive notification before the town meeting, and we have made our budget based on what we approved tonight, I would certainly want to revisit it and call upon school committee to reconvene, as well as our advisory, because I would want the support when we would go forward with a different budget figure. You know, it would be my hope that they would have some resolution and some guidance prior to our town meeting.
okay, so we have until April, yeah, okay.
But
That's
so
good.
then, is there a way to create a little bit of a buffer if we think that, so that we have, like, this is what we're planning to spend, but since we can't make changes, we're gonna say this, so that, is there any, because it's an unusual situation, is there any way to create some sort of unusual?
But we don't have it.
Well, I know we don't have it, so we, that's.
No,
why
but we don't even have a ballpark figure. And if in fact we don't get any of the funding, then we have to determine how we're going to make this budget work. And I think that's what we've done in looking at this. I think when you hear, and I will let Chris share with you a walkthrough on the budget as it's proposed tonight, I think you will look at it and realize that there has been extensive work that has been done on this to, again, Russ, where are you? To again try to meet what the towns are needing and to come as close as we can with the 1%. We're there. This is beyond what we had thought we could do. And you are so slim with your budget. As I have talked to Christine, and she has said, we'll be fortunate if we have a variance of 20,000 at the end of the year. That is reflective, for a budget this size, that is reflective of an extremely tight budget. And my hat's off to Barbara and to the Pine Hill team for being very fiscally responsible in their expenditures and the way they've looked at their budget. So, thank you. Do you want to do a walkthrough on that? Okay.
The latest handout, which, okay. Basically, the direction of the school committee and Valerie at the last meeting was to try to turn over every rock to try to close the gap at the time was it last week? I think it was. Last
Thursday
week.
night snowstorm.
Oh, I know. Last week, yeah, Thursday. We had a $53,000 gap between advisory's number and the Pine Hill budget, including the regional out-of-district. As a result of further discussion and also notification from a teacher, we do have a leave of absence coming, which would allow us to still run 20 sections, but at a much a reduced rate. Currently, the position, the variance between what we would bring a long-term sub in versus the teacher's salary is approximately $30,000. And you can see that in the middle of the analysis, or the gap analysis, presented March 12th, which is really the 13th. Just realized that. So that $30,000 is a further reduction, as well as in analyzing the world language program, we did actually increase the operating budget by $30,000. However, the Pine Hill share of that world language program is only $23,000, so we could reduce an additional $7,000 for total reductions over the previous budget presented back in December of, now we're at $138,447. Originally, we had a variance in December, $278,000, or 4.93% over last year. We've got that down to 2.46%. Further analysis of the out-of-district tuition and transportation for the region, as I mentioned before, we almost sit down at this stage of the game weekly between Audrey Moran, Terry Green, to analyze the out-of-district and anything we can tweak out, because we know more every week. Cases are closing or IEP hearings have been held. And as a result of a change in service level, we can further reduce the regional out-of-district by $12,000. What that does is it gets our gap down to $4,061, or a 0.06% of budget, which is, I believe, astronomical when you think we were looking at an increase, a substantial increase back in December.
So,
This does still take into consideration the previous cuts, however, the health aide, the health tutor, reduction of the assistant principal from a 1.0 to a 0.8 in 10 months, transition of a staff, basically in SPED, and reduction from of a technology teacher to a 1.0 to a 0.8. It does still factor in those reductions.
The transition of staff, is that what did you refer earlier to a reduction in preschool? Is that what that is?
No, that's a reduction in aid.
The transition of staff.
Right.
Did you refer to a reduction in preschool?
No.
Okay.
Because of the
Must have.
federal programs, I think she was.
That's what I was referring to, that there is a reduction in the funding. There is a grant that we are eligible for, and there is a reduction in that grant funding anticipated. We haven't received the information, Greg, but we have gotten an overview as to what the grants will be that they're looking at reducing, and they've hit special ed pretty hard. As I said when this first started, my greatest concern is as the federal government is asking for more and more services for our special needs children, and they take these reductions in grants that are given to special ed that the special ed department very much depends upon, the burden of still, and I do mean burden in a very sensitive way, of funding the needs that have to be put in place, then goes back to the general operating budget of the school or the municipality. So I do feel as though, I've said this repeatedly, I think it's a very good time in which to contact legislators and to let our legislators know that there is real concern in the fact that the one area that has been so sensitive in our funding with special education now is looking at significant reductions in the funding sources. I'm sorry I got on my soapbox on that, Greg, but did I answer that, your question?
Yes, I misunderstood. The $12,000 reduction in service level, that takes the form of what? Going to a different school than you had been planned, or that's a different?
It may be an IEP change. This is on the regional side, so, which is,
Oh, okay.
as far as the regional, it was a regional case that it occurred in, and it would be a reduction in service to a placement.
Okay.
what was the adjustment for world language sharing? That $7,000, what was that? Did I? Was I not listening?
Are less than, the numbers that Pine Hill has, your student enrollment, is less than what Dover has. So I think that the original formula was calculated on your student numbers. And what we had originally done, I think in the presentation, was just to divide it 50-50 as far as the cost. And that was not what was originally agreed to. So as we were looking deeper into the budget and trying to find out where can we make further reductions, something sparked a chord with the group think tank, and somebody said, wait a minute, I think that they said it was 23 instead of 30. That might have been Christine. And we went back in and did our homework and also checked with Dover, and that was exactly what they had indicated to us.
So theirs was 7,000 more then?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
The 23,000 is from our World Language Committee projection. We had just rounded it up in our original budget anticipation. But that's what came out of our world language presentation for the initial cost.
Does that affect the full implementation? And from the December presentation, it was about 102,000. And you were talking about savings, doing something through the Spanish consulate. You're still basically planning on these numbers going forward?
I would recommend that you not plan on those. I would recommend that you approve the plan as it is designed for this year, where you have a shared position. I would then strongly recommend that you revisit the plan and look at the cost, knowing that we have some economical challenges. We can still implement the plan, perhaps not exactly as it was originally designed. Because if you look at what the cost factor was, you have multiple teachers. And I think you can do a very, very good job of implementing world language at the elementary level with less than what was originally planned. I think on the original plan, you had 4.3 teachers between the two schools.
This shows 3.5. I think this was reduction. This shows 3.5. This was the latest presentation I can recall.
Okay, well, I might have been looking at
It
an
showed
old one.
3.5, and it showed Pine Hill in the first year at 24.5 versus 32.4 for Chickering. I'm just curious.
Greg, I'm speaking from my own personal experience, having been the superintendent of a district where we did have a K through 5 world language program, and we had one teacher. Now, did she want more time? Yeah, she would have liked to have had additional time because it was limited as the program grew and went to the higher grade levels. So I do feel that if we continue to work with the Spanish consulate, and I thought that he was very positive in the way in which he presented the benefits to our district. Being able to have a teacher that would be certified with Massachusetts licensure and able to teach a foreign language. We were also talking about would they be well prepared as far as the developmental ages of an elementary child as opposed to secondary. That was also an area that was explored. And that was something that I thought was a tremendous resource and that Dover Sherborn should really maximize. You've got a consulate that really wants to work with you. I would say strongly take advantage of it. He also seemed to feel as though there were some curriculum guidelines that could be added. I also feel as though your curriculum work on the development of the programs could be done during the summer as a summer stipend, which would help to narrow down some of the charge of the teacher who is teaching during the year to at the same time be developing the curriculum for the following year. So there are ways of which you can have a very rich and good program, but also looking a little more fiscally responsible given our situation. I love the model as it was designed. I'm just being very realistic about what I think is another way to perhaps achieve the goal and benefit the children.
Can I ask a quick question on the foreign language program? When it's fully rolled out, how many FTEs are you anticipating Sherborn to be responsible for?
25. That is a part that we're disagreeing on. The point that Greg has just brought up was, I think, a 3.5 for the two school districts. What I would suggest is that you could probably have a very healthy program without going with the 3.5, but going with less teachers, perhaps one at each one of the locations, with the anticipation that depending upon how the program grows, you may want to revisit that. But if you have the support, which has been promised to you, of the Spanish consulate to help with bringing in Spanish teachers from Spain, which to me was also a concern because of the different dialects that are spoken in Spanish around the world. It would be primarily Castilian. I think that that would be an avenue of which we should explore to be able to find a way to implement a very good design, but at a different cost factor.
So you're thinking just to put boundaries on it, between 1 and maybe 1.75 if you take Greg's number, something like that?
Long-term, looking at the entire program, I probably would initially look at one per site. Right now, you're starting off with a 0.4 at each site.
Thanks.
And just a footnote, we projected the teacher enrollments, the teacher projections based on our current enrollments. Both Chickering and Pine Hill are experiencing a decline in enrollment. So this is based on 20 sections.
Based on what's going on now.
I would anticipate, unless we have a huge influx, we'll be down to 18 sections in the next few years, so.
Thank you.
So, can we ask questions now? I mean, there's.
I think we walked you through, the changes that we bring to you tonight. So we're prepared to answer questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, did you want to start with some questions? or-
Yeah, I have a question for Terry, and I have to say, I completely confess that I do not even begin to understand all the regulations and the paperwork that's involved in the SPED program. But I feel like since we're so lean, I just have a quick question about if there are ways to decrease the amount of time that the highest paid teachers and tutors who are working with students spend on what seems to be paperwork. Because I know that in some cases, the one-on-one time with students may be like 5 hours, and the numbers are not exact, but the time spent prepping, meeting, paperwork is like 10 hours for those 5 hours. Is there any way that could it be centralized, or are they providing more opportunity for more paperwork? Is that what seems to be happening?
Always more opportunity for more paperwork. I think I would be surprised to see if there was a 2-to-1 ratio of any. I don't think there are any of our staff that are spending twice as much time with paperwork as they are with students. But by nature of what we do, there is a lot of paperwork that goes with the job. And to centralize that, it doesn't really happen that way. So for example, as a student is referred to the special education department for the first time, staff in each of their specialties, so maybe occupational therapy, maybe speech and language, maybe academic testing by a special educator takes place. Each of those staff members have to spend a certain amount of time with that student in order to evaluate them, to complete the evaluations. And then teachers do reports. They are most often, my experience is that they're doing those outside of school hours at this point. Mm-hmm. So they put together a report on the findings of their evaluations. And then we have to by regulation, all of the people who evaluated and myself, we sit at the table with the parents to determine eligibility. So is there a way to centralize that? Not unless we wanted to consider at some point a separate position for someone who just did evaluations and reports. It's not possible to centralize the evaluations that need to be done, the reports that are done on those evaluations, and then the time is spent sitting at the team meetings. In addition to that, once a student we do have a meeting. If a student's found eligible, we determine a liaison that's responsible for that student. Then they have to write the education plan that goes with that student, and then each quarter they write quarterly reports on each of the objectives. So if they're receiving services from a few different service providers, each of those service providers have to write a quarterly report on the student progress towards their goals and their IEPs. There is, by nature, just a lot of paperwork. I don't know of a way that we could centralize all of the things that go into working with the students as far as paperwork.
And if I might add on to that, I think that the state and the federal mandates for special education also create a tremendous amount, along with the evaluation process. I think that those requirements also are time-consuming. And I do agree with Terry that the paperwork, if it becomes an issue of interfering with the students, I would have to say your staff is quite incredible with getting it done when it doesn't interfere with their time with the students. That is their one thing that they have repeatedly addressed with me, is that they don't like when the paperwork is putting a burden on them, and they feel as though it's beginning to encroach on the amount of student time. And when you do a little further research, they are not liking it, but quite frankly, I'm pretty impressed with the fact that they will not sacrifice the time with the students.
The other thing to note is, as you probably know, all of the paperwork that happens in special education all happens with a timeline. So once we get a referral for a student, you have this many days in order to, get paperwork to parents. Once you get the paperwork back from parents, you have this many days completed. Everything is on a timeline as well. The other thing I do have to say about the staff that I work with at Pine Hill that has not always been the case is they are always willing, because we are a very inclusionary school, there's a lot of consultation that's happening between our staff and regular education so that they can make the students' experience in the general ed classroom very successful. They have to meet, they have to plan, they have to work with each other to make sure we're accommodating students. Our staff is doing a large portion of that before the start of their contractual school day. By their own, they volunteer to do that. Or after, at the end of the school day. So it's really a really wonderful thing to see that they're willing to go outside of what they need to do contractually to make sure that's not interfering with their school day as well.
And I would be remiss if I didn't add, while there's a lot more procedural requirements in special education, our classroom teachers are conducting ongoing as well as benchmark assessments, report cards. The amount of time beyond teacher contract time has shifted greatly in our profession in the last 15 years or so.
I believe
Phrase
that.
24/7 has had real meaning in the field of education. Sunday, if you talk to a lot of teachers, that wonderful, glorious Sunday afternoon is usually sacred planning time, or getting themselves ready for the following week. I mean, it is amazing the amount of time that is spent. We talk about having the summers off, the amount of time that is spent in planning and preparation among the teachers is quite impressive.
So granted, it's not as time-bound outside of special education, but I would say the workloads are very equitable in terms of teacher contract time, student contact time, and procedural kinds of, analyzing assessments and planning, record keeping, et cetera, is fairly congruent with our special educators and general educators.
Is there a difference of any sort between staff versus contracted personnel?
In
Difference in how their hours are reported and how they, I think because the numbers that I've seen have probably been contracted service providers.
Okay.
So that's, I think, where the questions stem from. And it's not that I'm questioning, I just want to understand it, really. And I'm wondering if because they tend to contracted workers tend to be more hourly, they're keeping track, so it maybe comes across differently from staff members, like a full-time employee.
It is possible that when contracted service providers provide us with an invoice, they are asked to separate out direct service and other things that they're doing, attending meetings, things like that. But there is always an agreement with contracted service providers in advance of the number of hours that are expected and that they are to provide to us.
And
So-
sorry.
No, that's fine. I guess so basically what happens is they have a contract with us. We tell them we're contracting you for this amount of hours. If they have work that goes beyond those hours that they take with them, they do not bill us for that. There is a maximum number of hours that we contract with them.
That makes sense.
And perhaps a distinction in that our contractual employees are therapists, speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, perhaps, behavior specialists, perhaps, versus teaching staff. So we certainly have therapists on staff as well, but the distinction, the nuanced distinction, they're not providing reading, writing, academic support, they're providing therapeutic services, plus all of the assessment that goes with that. So there's a bit of a role distinction.
Are most of those part-time then, those people, or the contracted
Yes,
services, they're all
and
part-time?
we've had different contracted services at different times. Some we've had before that we no longer have, some we have now that we haven't had in the past, and that changes based on student IEPs and needs at the time.
I've got a question regarding staff, what you're just talking about. In the enrollment and staffing data that we got, that kind of matrix, there were special ed teachers, there were 7 listed, and special ed aides, 9, TBD 9 to 10. So with the reduction, is that number going to be 9? Or what number should we use for 13, 14?
I'm sorry, yes, it would be 9.
And on the other thing that, another page we got from you, I don't know what to call it. It's just the SPED population. It's got SPED teachers, SPED aides, and then OT and speech, and there's 2.4 there, which I guess is not on this page, but are those full-time, where are those people?
I'm looking for it.
They're real.
Huh? They're real? Well, I hope so.
They are.
Greg, there's a 1.0 occupational therapist in the budget, the rest is contractual. There's a 1.0 speech pathologist in the budget, the rest is contractual.
Hold on. So these are, I'm sorry, they're contract.
They're both a combination, employed by the town of Sherborn as well as contracted services. So in our current operating budget, there's a 1.0 occupational therapist and a 1.0 speech pathologist.
Yes.
And then the additional,
And they're not on,
They are not.
again, I'm sorry for pulling this.
I believe none, I believe only guidance and school psych was requested on the template, so they're not listed there.
Okay, but
Yeah,
they're in the special
Yes.
ed, under the special ed.
Yes.
So speech, OT, each 1.0, and then our school psychologist is in the budget at a 0.4.
But that is there.
But that's not,
Oh, I'm
It
sorry,
says-
that is there.
There is a line that says guidance and school psychologist, and it says for 13, 14, 1.4. 0.4 of that is our school
Oh, it's-
psychologist in special education.
oh, okay.
But then you would also have OT, speech, and PT as contractual services. No PT?
Well, yeah, she is contracted.
She's contracted, yeah.
So the 0.4, is that the,
School
is that
psychologist.
the psychologist?
And the 1.0 is guidance counselor,
That's in the.
operational
That's in special
budget.
ed, and that's
That's-
considered part of the in-district budget,
That
right?
is- The guidance is not part of the special
Right.
education.
Guidance would be
The psych-
considered general
School
education.
right, school
Psychologist would be
is-
considered part of the,
Yes.
do you make a distinction between, that's in-district, right? I mean, you don't allocate part of that to out-of-district?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
And after the meeting, if you would like, I had some written comments to your email. Nothing, but you just may be interested in glancing over them afterwards.
So Frank, did you have any questions that, no?
Can I just,
Okay.
I don't want to take time from up there, but I have a quick question. I don't have, well, first of all, let me take a step back and say unbelievable work, hard work. I know all of you did in finding those reductions and having to make tough choices, and I really appreciate it. I remember how it was and how difficult it was. So bravo, great work. Question on enrollment. Are you anticipating I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there was about 60, 65 students going into fourth grade. Were you anticipating 3 or 4 sessions for that And if it's 4, could you explain that to me? And that's basically my question.
We have 62 children going into 4th grade next year. We anticipate 3 sections.
Fourth.
We have 67 children currently in 3 sections of 2nd grade, and our goal would be to put them in 4 sections of 3rd grade.
Rather than try to chop it into 3?
They're currently in 3, and we're encroaching on class sizes of 23. And we've had the conversation about,
That is correct.
23 is
within
within
policy.
the guidelines, and it states them as fairly broad guidelines, and things being as tight as they are, why not go with 3? I mean, they're going from within guidelines to below guidelines. So,
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, we did look at that, Greg, and that was one of our considerations, but we also, you have to look at the class profile, you have to look at the needs of the children that are passing through the group dynamics, you have to talk to the instructional, the behaviorals, how many special needs children are in that classroom. We're an inclusive classroom, and when the administration sits down with me and we go grade level by grade level by grade level, those are all considerations that are tied in, and you'll notice that there's a reduction that's been made on one grade level because we felt as though that could be made and not jeopardizing the quality of instruction, whereas we needed the support at the other. So that was the rationale behind that. And I feel as though, you know, we talk about it being so tight. I feel as though it is tight, but I also feel, in respecting what the administrators and the teachers have indicated to me, Chris, Steve, and I have gone back into the budgets. We've done everything that we can to protect the instructional quality of Pine Hill. And there comes a point where I feel as though there has to be a little bit of understanding about these group dynamics. And when I come to you and say I have a need for this grade level to be as is being presented to you, know that there are a number of variables that are brought into that decision.
And is that the grade, 3rd grade, where there's a teacher out on leave and substitutes?
No, that's not the grade.
Which one? That's 4?
We haven't disclosed that.
The teacher hasn't gone public yet, to my knowledge. So just,
But it's not that grade level.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
definitely, yeah.
Could we get an update maybe on the line item that we talked about before, well, not the assistant principal status?
I believe I started the meeting off with addressing
I'm
that.
sorry, I missed it.
Oh, okay. Well,
So I don't wanna take up any time, somebody else.
I would be happy to go ahead and readdress in case there were others that also missed that. There was follow-up on looking for additional funding. One of the areas that I wanted to look at was Chapter 1, because I felt as though that was grant money that is usually pretty consistent. Unfortunately, that is also targeted through the sequester, and that is not money I can count on. So as I, shared with school committee, I can't make a commitment to either school committee or to the individual when I don't know what the state is going to finally decide to allocate in that. My greatest hope is that the state will come through with some funding above and beyond what we had hoped. This budget is a flat budget as far as that state funding. My hope is that there will be something that will be allocated towards the public school. That then gives me a resource that I can revisit and I can bring to the school committee. Our greatest concern is that we are not getting any information from the state. It would be very helpful if you and the parents that are interested in this would also contact the legislators to say, we're up against the wall. We have to present a budget because our towns are regulated by their bylaws. We're complying with that, but we're very frustrated because we're not getting any guidance from the state beyond the initial that was given before the sequester. What we've been given is, this is serious, the reductions will hurt. We've gotten a list out of Washington DC that has indicated special education is going to be hit pretty hard on the grants that we receive for that. One of the grants that we have depended upon for a long time for reading and mathematics has been Title I. We've been able to do before and after school tutoring on that. That's another program that we're waiting to find out. So in order to be responsible to the quality of instruction throughout the school, we've tried to bring forward the budget that will allow us to continue to deliver strong instruction within the classroom. But if I don't get any additional funding, this is it.
So your choices and recommendation is a stance, then the world language is in and the assistant principal is at what could be a level that we will lose the person.
Well, as you're saying that, the salary level is certainly not a diminished level I mean, there are reductions that have been made. It has been painful all the way across, but it is certainly not something that, it is what it is, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Well, what I pick up on is Nan's choice of words there, that choices, you know, I think that we still have choices. I mean, this is not an approved budget yet. It's what is before you, and I think there still are choices here to be made. So, you know, until the vote has been taken, it's not been decided. So, really, it's in your 5 people's hands as to what we're going to choose. And, you know, I don't think that we can say that we've already made a choice to do that yet, because, you know, what I see in this budget is that we have added programs, and that when we talk about the cut in level services, well, you're right. So we've cut the level service that I see being cut is that of the assistant principal. And when I see added programs, and maybe they're necessary, I'm not arguing that. You know, perhaps we do need that additional teacher in that grade, and perhaps we do need the world language program. But let us not fool ourselves that is a choice, and we're choosing that over the assistant principal position. And you know, and I think that you know, in past superintendents and 2 principals ago, we always, what was on the chalkboard at Pine Hill when these used to be held at Pine Hill was kindergarten aides. Those were always the first things, and all the kindergarten parents would come and say, we need those aides, we need those aides. That's not even been thrown on the table. So, you know, I don't know where that falls. How many kindergartners are we expecting? Not how many letters have we sent out. How many kindergartners are we expecting next year? Do you guys know that answer?
We have appointments to register 50 children.
Okay, so 50 kids. So, you know, I don't know. I think that, you know, when we're looking at new programs, world language is new this year, but it would be new for the next 5 years. Is that right? 5 years it takes to roll it out, something like that. So, you know, and next year it's in the budget at 0.4. Did I hear that right? So it's a 0.4. But then I heard the projection that throughout all 6 grades at the school, that the total FTE would be a 0.1, a 1. So I don't know how you get from 0.4 in one grade to a 1 with a viable program to all 6 grades. It sounds as if either 0.4 is overestimated or 0.1 is, 0.4 is overestimated and 0.1 is underestimated. One of the two. I mean, you know, unless kindergartners need more time than the rest of the grades. And, you know, we talk about kindergarten for a minute and look at, this is the first year that we've had full day kindergarten. This is the first year, and we're talking about reduction in staff of assistant principal. Listen, I think the paramount, this is my opinion, and I've heard it read it in the minutes or heard from the administrators, you know, what we need to maximize is teacher face time. And that's what's important in the budget. But I have to say, with this full day kindergarten, it's only been in the budget 1 year, okay? So basically what we added was Monday full day, Friday full day, and some Wednesdays, right? So that's 12 to 3, Mondays and Fridays. Okay, what's in those 3 hours? You've got a lunch, you've got a second recess, and now we're paying for world language to be taught in that time too, and that's not those 3 things are not teacher time. So I just want to say that I think that there may still be work to be done here, and have we looked at kindergarten age? If we're going to have this world language program in the afternoon, right, can we look at maybe reducing those kindergarten aides? Maybe we don't need them for the lunch. Maybe they're not needed for the second recess. Maybe they don't need to be in the classroom if the world language teacher is there. That's a point 4, right? So I'm just saying that I think we still have choices, and it's up to the 5 of you to figure out what you think is most important to the school. And what I've been hearing from this side, from the chairs facing this way, is teacher time and assistant principal. So I'll leave it at that.
One comment I would like to make, and I would like to assure school committee and audience that you entrust your children in a highly skilled and a very thoughtful faculty and administration. And they do look at a lot of different aspects before they come before this type of a meeting. So, you know, I appreciate, as you were discussing some of the different points, certainly the issue of choice does remain with the school committee. But the issue of not exhausting a lot of possibilities and looking at legal requirements and looking at a lot of different variables is what is taken into consideration. I would share with you, you have one very exhausted group of administrators before you right now. It has not been easy. And one of the things that we did not forget was when you and a number of parents came to us in earnest, and you made it very clear that you did not want to lose those teachers. And by golly, we worked extremely hard to honor the last 2 years when you all came to us and articulated it so eloquently and so carefully. So I do want you all to know that this has not been an easy journey, and it has not been slipshod or done without a lot of care. And certainly, school committee, we do bring forward to you our best thinking, and it is our recommendation. And I do feel as though, especially with some of you that have served on the world language, you have not brought together. Full kindergarten was a change in a kindergarten program that we have. This is the first time that we're bringing forward a new program, where I would consider a new program in the 5 years that I've been here. It is definitely your choice to determine whether you want to implement that or not. In my looking at a 0.4 and then a 1 is not to say that one is overstaffed or one is understaffed, but to entertain the opportunity to look at there are different charges that are being given to the entry-level teacher that perhaps a sustaining teacher would not have to have, and that there are different ways of thinking about how to make this work. Thank you.
And the only comment I had was just, I feel like I'm no expert in any of these areas, education, finance, or whatever. So I really do, I have to say, I really do rely on the administration to do their due diligence and, you know, really study and figure it out and make recommendations, because I feel like they're the experts. And, you know, as much as I feel like a lot of these choices are difficult, I do look to them for guidance. So there's other people on, you know, the committee that have a little more experience, but we're all, you know, volunteers. We're not working in the administration. So There's a lot of stuff that we don't know. And the other comment I had was about, world language, as far as, I said this last week too, not doing it. We are faced with Chickering doing it and us not doing it. So when you start talking about, level services and having two schools that are, feeding into one school after so many years, I'm concerned that you don't want to start that disparity, because, it's not just the, last couple of years, it's the whole time you're at Pine Hill, once the program is implemented. And, that doesn't mean we can't start it another time, but, you just have to think about all kinds of elements. It's not just you can't substitute one for the other, and you can't think that one is a better option or a more, an option that supports the level services more than the other, because I don't think that's what we're dealing with. I'm thinking that, each option is striving towards that same goal. So I would really hate to see a disparity start growing between the schools. It's just something to think about. It's another piece of information, and it's a really complex equation to try to put it all together. So, and I certainly can't say I know a lot. So again, I do rely on them quite a bit. So I don't know, I don't want to speak for everybody.
Yeah, I'd like to respond too. I agree with a lot of what you said, but when I became a member of the school committee, looking through our legal responsibilities, what we find is I was surprised at how little control we have. Our responsibility, the way I see it, is really to the outcome of the students, the quality of the education. You can define that in a number of ways. I don't like using the word level service because I haven't yet learned what that means. In some ways, if you see the population is declining 30 students, but we keep the same number of teachers, we're increasing the level of service. Some could argue. Others could argue also that replacing administrators with teachers, whether it's world language or anything else, is a positive thing. So I agree with Susan. We need to ask questions. We need to make sure that we need to trust but verify. But ultimately, they are the experts, and they're telling us this is what they need. So unless it's really unusual, I think we go along with what they say for the most part, unless we think that it's going to have a negative outcome on the student's education. It's a tough call, but very much appreciate your comments.
It's certainly not an easy decision to make. I feel as though we cannot look at the world language program versus, one position on this. There's a lot of reductions that are embedded in this document. I've been giving this a lot of thought as well. From my perspective, the positives of having the world language program, beyond what's already been said, is that this is a program that has been presented to me with data and research to show that learning a foreign language, learning a world language, has very positive benefits to the development of the child, of the learner. That ultimately should translate into higher scores, better preparedness, better academic ability. And from my perspective, where I sit, and from what Greg just articulated, that is our goal, is to make sure that we provide the best education for our students and that our students grow to the very best of their ability. Here's a program that will offer that to us, and I would hate, after all the work that's been putting into it, not to provide that to our students if we know that's something that's going to benefit our students. It's unfortunate that this year we have the sequestration as opposed to what we were looking at back in December. That's an unfortunate thing. Had that not been the situation, we would be in a little bit different financial position right now. But I think that's the thing that we're looking at. Do we let the cost dictate it, or do we let the benefit to the students, to our students, to our children, the children of Pine Hill, and ultimately our school district? And that's the decision that I think we're facing, not a decision between one person and a program.
I don't think anybody is disputing, the world language programs is a great program, and it's, something that everybody would like to have. I don't think that's the discussion. I think the discussion is, how do we pay for it? Not just this year, but next year and going forward. And in regard to, having the equal playing field, I don't necessarily think that the curriculums in Dover and Chickering and Sherborn are exactly the same anyway, are they?
Our MCAS scores are higher.
Yeah, and our curriculum is different as well. So I get that you want it to be on an equal playing field, but if you have a student coming into middle school in 6th grade and hasn't been in Pine Hill or in Chickering, then they're at a competitive disadvantage anyway for them as well, right?
Our learning standards are the same. Our units of study are organized a little bit differently, except in math, which are congruent.
I'll just throw this out there. If you look at the numbers, if you look at similar sized elementary schools, you'll find very few of them the size of Pine Hill have an assistant principal. So a lot of people could argue that perspective. I mean, maybe you could argue with how it's come about, but there's an argument to be made that a lot of school systems, whether it's colleges or public schools, are administratively heavy. So ultimately, it may not be it's bad personally, but in the scheme of things, again, less dollars spent on administration. A lot of people would agree with. Probably nobody here, but others that I've talked with. Did I see Mary Wolf out there? Is Mary still? Sealy? Okay.
Greg, I just follow up because I think that's the distinction we were trying to make in trying to engage on this conversation. That I think we're all here for the same reasons. The children are our compass. We're all here for the best experience possible for the children. And I applaud all the volunteer hours that go into what you do. It's with that we see this individual who we have invested 2 years in, who is invested in us as essential to that quality experience. And I understand that on paper it makes sense, and you call him an administrator, and it's an easy place to cut. When you look at the impact he's made on so many children, the improvement in their education, that's what we're fighting for. That's what we're trying to articulate. We're not saying we find the administrative position an essential one for whatever other reasons. It's because he's made a strong impact on kids. And it would be a shame to save $30,000 this year, to lose somebody we've invested so much in who is making such strong contributions. Now, there might be a ton of things I don't know about. And I give you guys, good graces. If it's not working out as dramatically positive as we see it on this side, that's a conversation and a decision for you guys to have in confidence, and we'll back whatever your ultimate decision is. But if we're talking about the best experience for our children with quality educators, this person would be devastating to lose from where we sit. And the budget, as before you to vote on it, means losing them.
But can I ask a question? Does it mean that he will definitely leave?
He can't stay for the salary.
Well, now wait a second. That has not been, that has not been identified. It has not been discussed. The indication he has given me is that he did plan to stay. So whatever you all have discussed with him, if you've had discussed on a personal level, it has not been brought to the administration, and those are the proper channels that it should be followed. He has asked for support. We have given him support, as we have every other person that's been listed on this list. And I would say that there are different personality styles that may be more visible and more apparent, but it doesn't dismiss the importance of what some of these other people that have been equally hurt and equally disappointed and that are walking on that difficult, difficult journey with their lips closed, their heads held high, and you would never even know that they were hurting. And they're hurting. I've talked to them. The other thing that I want to say is never, don't think for 1 minute that it is ever easy to minimize or reduce an administrative position. The burdens on the administrators are incredible. Incredible. And you are served by some of the best. This was not an easy decision. This was a very laborious and difficult decision. Everything that can be done to support the people who have been directly impacted by these reductions is being looked at. This is one particular position. I appreciate the fact that you have had good and positive experiences with this person. But I've got other people that have had really good and positive experiences with some of the other people that have been hurt. And they're the silent majority. And I am committed to all of you. I've listened patiently. It really, really is upsetting to me that I have this position of which I have brought to the school committee. But I also am as committed to the teachers and to that direct instruction in the classroom. And I can't sacrifice that either. And you're not in the same position you once were. And your towns have been screaming for the last 3 years at least, feeling as though, I feel like I'm Darth Vader-ette with the way in which they have, really, they have been so upset with me. I think there are some of them on advisory that have a bullseye with my face on it. They throw darts at it every night. She won't work with us because I have so fiercely tried to protect, and you're not far from me, Russ, because you were chair for a while too, so you probably were a bullseye too. But it's been difficult. And it has not been an easy term in trying to work together on trying to solve these difficult problems. And, Greg has asked a jillion questions, and that's not an exaggeration. Trying to understand the complexity of where are they, what are they doing, how is this different than business and industry, how do we solve this? These are not easy issues to solve. The one thing that I can tell you is this is the best solution I can bring in the best interest of the total school and in protecting the quality of instruction for all of the students at Pine Hill. And Nan, and for those of you that have been here to support one particular position, I'm probably bright red right now because there's a part of me that's right there with you. And it really is uncomfortable for me to have to articulate what I am articulating, but it has been a miserable year in trying to find the right solutions. So, sorry, Madam Chair.
Excuse me. Yes, Frank.
As you look at the history here, about 2.5 years ago when we had to cut classroom teachers, most of the parents that called me were calling saying, don't cut the classroom teacher. And they said directly, cut the assistant principal's position. And so, I think it depends. I mean, if we were in the position of cutting, one of the classroom, right now, cutting down the sections that they have, I think you probably get some of that same pressure because everyone's looking for the best for the kids, which they should. But the pressure in the past has been the other direction. But I see the assistant principal as being a very important position because we have this new evaluation system starting next year, and it's going to take many more hours. So that I would hope that whatever the bottom line is passed as a budget tonight, that, and I'm sure they won't, the administration will not stop working on this because they will still have flexibility within their bottom line to make adjustments, as they go along to perhaps mitigate some of the problems that are happening with these loss of positions.
Amy.
My question is, since seems that we're going down the road of committing to a language program that's going to cost least for 6 years, and however much that is seems to be determined, and then the $30,000 savings that's being used on the long term, the salary difference there that is a 1-year thing. I know that we're bordering on 20 to 19 sections as it is this year, and I'm assuming that when the next year's 5th grade rolls off, that unless there's some huge kindergarten influx, that we'll be looking at 19 sections. But what does committing to the language program and using a one-time salary savings that will be back on, what else is it gonna cost us next year? What are we gonna be sitting here and I think there needs to be, before there's a commitment to a program like that, there needs to be discussion about what it's going to cost us. And not just now, but in the years going forward, because it's gonna be a drain on finite resources.
Susan, first of all, I think it's important to clarify, this is not a one-time salary savings, at least at this stage of the game. As enrollments continue to decline, there's going to be more and more pressure on this operating budget. So that $30,000 that we are saving because we're reducing the AP's position, that for now, for the foreseeable future, is continuous. So it's not a one-time savings.
Right, so there'll be 19 sections. I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, is that gonna be the extent of what the additional, I understand how it's being used this year and it's being an offset, but all things being equal, were that teacher to come back next year and there were gonna be 20 sections, which I know is a lot of ands, that $30,000 would have to be found somewhere again. So I just don't know what this is gonna cost, when we're sitting here next year and it's been a difficult budget season, because I don't think advisory is I don't think the Sherborn revenues are going anywhere. What is gonna cost us next year?
Amy, I think one of the key phrases that you used, all things being equal, and that's a part of what we're struggling with. All things are not equal. And, as far as looking at the funding, I feel as though I've addressed that. I know it's been presented repeatedly to all 3 of the school committees and then again jointly. I do feel as though you have had an invitation by the Spanish consulate to provide teachers to you that will be certified. I think that will be a tremendous savings as opposed to looking at the hiring of the teachers. I think redesigning the program so that the children get the instruction, but perhaps not with the model that was put together. I think those are due consideration. And I think that if we look at existing world language programs, we will find that there is another method by which we can implement that and that the children can have that exposure.
And just one line, what is the technology replacement line item right now? Is there one? What's the amount?
It has a $9,000 increase, and that increase is to primarily bring technology back to the level it should be at and was at 3 years ago.
Well, that's the increase, so is it $9,000 or it's an increase of $9,000 over, what's the line item?
It's currently 17,
Hold on.
and it's currently $17,000, and we're projecting, we want to bring it back to where it was before a last round of cuts.
27.5 is the new.
So it's currently 19, sorry. We want to bring it up.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. In the budget that they're getting ready to vote, is it gonna be 27 or 19?
It's going to be 27. It's going to be back to its original funding source, which incidentally does not cover our replacement costs.
But it's a lot more than I thought you were gonna say, so that's good.
One last comment about world language. And I don't mean to repeat myself, but the committee worked on it for many years. It's not, again, it's not like it was a new thing. And one of the things they looked at was the financial impact on the schools. And there were several models that they could choose from. And it was, it was a long process and a lot of research and a lot of figuring things out to come up with a model that made sense for our school that we could afford. I mean, it wasn't that simple as, oh, let's just do that and here's what it cost. I mean, it was done in a way that was, I thought, fiscally conservative. And it was over a long period of time. And again, it just so happens that, this is the year, next year we're implementing it, and it's a really tough budget season. But we definitely should stop putting it together with the, as an offset, because that's not really what it is. And these are all individual items that, again, had to be thought about and considered.
What I continue to say is it's a new program in a tough budget year, and that's hard to swallow.
And I would just
And
add,
it keeps going up. Sure.
Sue, I would just add, there was strategic planning that was done among the three communities with members across, school committee, parents, administrators, and others from the community that were selected based on their interest in shaping the strategic planning of the schools. And the one initiative everybody really did agree on was to bring foreign language to the elementary schools. So it's something that really had community support beyond just the schools, but to the larger community. And it does happen to be landing in a tough budget year, but it lands where it lands.
Right. Any other questions from the audience? Anything else? Greg, did you have any other questions? I want to make sure everything is.
I've got one final question, not on a different topic, I guess. All right, it's more of a statement, I guess. At some point, I would like to have some clarity on like the class size, going from 3 teachers to 4 teachers, and looking at the demographics and that type of thing. And I understand that, but from a big picture, I look at the SPED population declining from 67 to 54. And I appreciate the keeping people in district and needing one-to-one aides for that. But that much of a decline and keeping the SPED staff virtually the same, I'm curious about the regular education aides, and we don't need to get into it tonight, but it just, at some point, it would be nice to have some clarity, because when you talk about the class and what the class looks like and needing more help or not needing more help. We had 8 aides with 465 kids. We have 8 aides with 110 fewer. And it just makes me wonder if some of the regular education aides are filling in for part of the SPED population. In other words, it seems like we've got enough people there that you could just keep 3 sections. So at some point, I would, Susan, I would like to have some sort of clarity on how all these things work together. In a couple of months or so.
Yeah, well, we talked about and I know this is different, we talked about having a workshop. I mean, we should probably put together a list of topics like that we want to talk about. And it would be good it'd be a good time for us to become educated on a lot of these things. Okay.
I'm sorry, this is like the meeting that will never end. I gotta say, I feel like a kid. I want it all. I want more language. I want a full-time assistant principal. I want full-time tech. And I know that that's
Your
not.
principal also wants a literacy expert.
Throw that in, sure.
Yeah.
And I know that that's not realistic. But I wonder if is there a way to look at pieces like we're talking about? And I'm sorry that we keep coming back to this one position, and I know it's one person, and that's not fair, but it happens to be the one I want to ask about. It's a 4-day and 10-month. We seem to be looking at the whole picture. Is there a way to look at like a 5-day, 10-month, and then as opposed to looking at an all or nothing for the assistant principal?
And that was one of the configurations that we are looking at, is looking at a 5-day with the 10-month. But until I can go ahead and get a handle on what's happening with Title I, and with the funding, because if I get hit with no additional funding, I don't want to make false promises, and I don't want to say something that's not going to be able to be funded. It is definitely a priority for me. I've heard loud and clear, the concerns and the wishes of our parents that are here, as well as school committee. I would be the first one to pick up the telephone and call Dr. Brown and say, get an email out to everybody, here's what we're going to do, contingent upon the agreement of the parties that are directly impacted.
So we can basically, go forward, and just promise that whatever information comes about in the next few weeks,
As soon as I
yeah,
hear something.
let everyone know, and
Immediately send an email out to all of you, just so that you know the information has arrived, or I've got
Right.
some figures, and then we can go from there.
right.
Just to make
We'll
another
revisit it,
point
yep.
to that, House Ways and Means budget is scheduled to come out generally the first week of April. Usually that's a pretty good indication of where they're going as far as the governor's proposal. I think we'll have a better handle.
Better idea, yeah.
At least on the state aid issue.
The other thing too, for school committee to be aware of, I have advised you that we have a family issue that will bring me off campus. And both Mr. Bliss and Chris, when I am not here and when I have been down to Atlanta to offer assistance to my daughter, they do not hesitate to call me frequently. Mr. Bliss was a little more conservative this last trip. However, I will tell you that I think we must have had 4 phone conversations, Chris and I. So please know that it will not be neglected. It remains a priority for me. And although I will be out of town, if that House budget comes in, she'll be on the phone or she'll text me. But we are in very strong communication. Mr. Bliss is also excellent about texting me. We've gotten to be quite the technology pair with our texting back and forth. So even if that is the case, as soon as I get the word, or if I get word, I will certainly text. I'll be checking my email on a regular basis, and we'll get back to you as soon as we hear something.
Okay, and just to reiterate, the real drop dead date would be,
Town meeting floor.
yeah, May 4th. So there is some time. You never know what will happen.
But
Okay, so-
again, I do think it is important to contact your legislators to let them know that to expect us to put together a budget in the absence of having, I feel as though we've been left out on a limb. We know that there's somebody sawing the limb off, but I don't have any information. We could be addressing this if I had some direction. I'm hearing absolutely nothing out of the state or the Department of Education. So it would really be helpful if you could contact your legislators and let them know what a bind this puts our local school districts as well as the towns.
Yeah, and normally you know by now. I mean, right now, you would, yeah.
Well, we've already gotten the cherry sheet. The problem
Yeah.
is,
Right.
we've also gotten
Okay.
a follow-up to say, hang on to everything.
The Title I, if they don't give you money for Title I and you're using the Title I for MCAS review, somebody who utilizes that, what happens if you don't get that Title I and your kids need that? Does that?
There are currently no intervention services in our operational budget. Anything we provide to students who, other than special education, any supplement we provide to children who are not making effective progress are creatively funded through grant sources. There are no, what we call RTI, intervention services, in our operational budget. That would be a priority for budgets moving forward.
Okay, I just wanted to.
However, if in fact that is stripped and we don't have that funding, that will probably be one of the first things that Mr. Bliss and I will be working with Dr. Brown on, because there are children, and as we continue to say, we want services for all of our children. I am not willing to see those children fall through the cracks. I would want to rethink the way in which we have done our business before and figure out how do we also make sure that that lifeline continues to be extended to all children.
And a strategy, did I cut you off?
No,
A strategy we've used, for example, our teaching assistants, and we'll talk in more detail at a future date. But the last few we've hired certified teachers.
Right.
And in this job market,
So
we
that
can
wouldn't
do
go
that.
away, really.
So
You'd
we,
still get the
we are augmenting in creative ways, but I just want to be clear, there's no reading specialists, there's no intervention tutors in our operational budget.
Do you use reading specialists for children that don't have an IEP?
Any school system I've ever been affiliated with has certainly had building-based reading specialists to provide intervention services, yes. Chickering so happens to have such a model.
Oh, I'll bet. They've also
Made
got-
it, in every school there's a reading specialist. I also, if I may just comment, I know, and I appreciate everyone's advocacy, and it feels like we're pitting a world language, or not pitting, but a lot of thought has gone into the short term and what we hope to grow for children in the long term. Unless we have an influx of baby booms here in Sherborn, or perhaps through additional housing, our enrollment will be down to 300 in the next handful of years. That's a reality. So I know it again, from a logical perspective, why are we adding something and detracting something? Our best thinking about what will provide the most riveting and engaging education to our students is why these combinations have been proposed. Our enrollment is declining by 30 students a year over the next few years. 25 students a year.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? I don't know where she went, but I think, oh, okay. I assume this is a good time, do you want to close what you're saying and then we'll have a vote?
Basically, the administration is recommending that the school committee approve the budget at $6,985,770.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to approve budget as presented tonight for $6,985,770? Hear a motion to approve that?
All of these eager people, but I move the number.
You move, okay. Second? You have a second? All in favor? Okay, all opposed? Is that three? Okay, 1, 2.
Passes 3-2.
Okay, 3 to 2.
Thank you.
Did Frank have his hand up? Was that 3 to 2? I didn't see what Frank.
Yeah, it was 3 to 2.
Okay.
That's what I have, is that?
3-2.
Thank you.
Okay, the next topic, we have to approve minutes. Well, let's do that really quickly. Wow, we have 3 different sets of meeting minutes. So do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes of January 15th?
It's the 29th and the 7th. It looks like you got 3 sets of minutes
Yeah,
here.
I was gonna do them individually.
Let me look at this one.
Good individually? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, but-
So moved, January 15th.
okay. All,
Budget on March the 7th.
that's it? Okay, did we hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then, a motion, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of January 29th?
I have a change. Under 3G, the motion to endorse the budget reductions, we had a discussion about that, about how we were voting on that as a bottom line, not on the line items. To can just clarify that. Does that make sense?
Made a motion to endorse the budget reductions. So how did you want to say it again? I'm sorry.
I don't know how to say it. Just I wanted noted the discussion that we were voting on that as a,
How about the total reductions as opposed to the line items?
yes, thank you.
Amy, did you get that?
Where does it say that?
Yeah, I don't know. I just endorse the budget reductions. Maybe just.
Where does it say in the line item?
It's here. So it wasn't that we voted on specific things, it was
Right.
on the bottom, on the number.
Isn't that what it says? Oh.
I just wanted to be clear.
Did you get that, Amy? Yeah. Okay.
Frank Hook.
Okay.
I thought it looked pretty good, actually.
I second that.
Okay, and then, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes on March 7th?
I have a few changes.
Okay.
We also, at this meeting, talked about a special ed buffer account. And I'd like for those to be reflected in the minutes that was mentioned, that's something we should be looking at. And we also talked about looking at the collaboratives utilizing space at Pine Hill. And I'd like for that to be
yeah.
reflected in the minutes as well. Those were, I felt, two important things.
Mhm. Okay, anything else?
I don't have the exact language for that, but there was quite a bit of discussion on that, so. In fact, there was actually some work done
Yep,
as a result of
great.
it afterwards, so.
Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve the minutes with the two modifications that Frank Hook just mentioned? Do I hear a motion?
I move, sorry.
Motion, second?
Second.
Okay, all, fair. Oh, we did? Oh, I thought we did. Okay.
So I move to
Amy, back
accept.
to the 29th. The motion, it has to be do I hear a motion to approve the minutes on the 29th with the modifications described by Ann? Second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor? Okay, all right. That's done. Any community comments, further comments? Anybody? Melissa?
Hi, I have a comment about the MCAS, discussion that I think that this committee had, was it in December? No, November, maybe it was November or October, it was based on the results of the MCAS for Pine Hill, and I know that, I know that I missed a school committee meeting, but I think it was just a budget meeting. So please correct me if you guys have spoken about this since then, but I know that at that meeting, there was some discussion about the disparity in scores amongst the genders at Pine Hill, and there was some interest on the committee as to, kind of exploring that a little bit, as well as from the superintendent's office. So I was wondering if there hasn't been an update on that, what the public can expect.
Can I say, I'm actually on a committee that is looking into that, and the meeting that we were supposed to have, was it last month? Didn't happen, so it's happening Thursday. So there has been some research, we've contacted some other school systems that have some ideas or some programs in place, and so we're in the process of at least discussing that. So it's moving slowly, but at least there's movement.
What committee is that?
Academic excellence.
Isn't there something that you were working on, Barbara? Yeah.
Yeah, internally, we've certainly had discussion.
Because I'm sorry, Melissa, you had asked me about that, and then it was supposed to be on the agenda for, I think, this meeting for an update. So I guess we'll have to put that on the next month. I'm sorry about that, because we had those communications and then the budget got in the way.
And the weather.
And the weather, yeah.
But please keep bringing that up, because it's good to be
Yeah.
reminded, because unfortunately, you forget.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? It was during that meeting, I think Mr. Banyos had mentioned strengthening the program in math and spending 15 minutes more per day on math. I've got the paper here someplace. Does that ring a bell? Is that implemented? Is that going to be implemented? And there was seemed like there was a conflict with world language. How are you going to work world language if that's 15 minutes a day? And well, I guess kindergartens aren't going to take math, but
I believe that was a recommendation, or something moving from last year to this year, that they tackled, having
Okay.
a larger math block that's uninterrupted. When we move, our scheduling from this year to next year, we have a list of priorities that I'm hopeful will accommodate for longer instructional blocks that aren't interrupted by a special subject or what have you.
So they said increased time for math from 45 to 60 minutes daily.
The math program requires 60 minutes. I
Okay.
mean, a strong math lesson is 60 minutes. So if we weren't up to par, we certainly are now.
Okay.
And the recommendation for math is 60 plus 10, with a 60-minute, a solid math workshop plus some supplemental math fact fluency kinds of work. So my hope would be a good 60 plus 10. It's a little bit less at the kindergarten level. Attention spans and
Okay.
all.
Okay. Sorry, where were we? Okay, any more community comments? Okay. CSA report.
Okay. We're working on the auction, which is April 27th. Our live auction online with Bidding for Good goes on in a couple weeks. We have some great stuff. I'll keep you apprised of what we have, so you too can go bid. Earn money for the school, the children. Tomorrow we are providing breakfast to the policemen to thank them for their just to thank them. And so parents have made some stuff. It's in the back of my car, in the refrigerator. And actually, Kate Taylor has been instrumental in making gigantic banners for the kids after school or before school, which it really, I think, just does a lot for, who it is we're thanking. We gave away over $6,000 in grants this spring, including iPods and atlases and graphic novels for the whole school, soccer nets.
And if I may interject a thank you, we budget $4,000 in spring grants, but our CSA kept saying yes, 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 so we spent $6,000 on grants.
And what else? I think we had a successful raffle basket little gig that made us $5,000, which was really great. So 4944. So it was good. That's where we are. I have to go back.
Good, okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Okay, next is any subcommittee reports? Anybody want
Do
to?
you want to hear about, the capital now or later during the budget?
Status of appropriate, yeah, we can hear about it now.
Okay, right, I just want to update you on the capital needs. I passed out a sheet here where it says like page 1 with this print so small that if you gave it to me, I'd be really mad. But it was something I wasn't able to change too easily. And what it does on page 2, it shows you that our 5-year needs, according to this plan that we paid for, would be $1,533,738 over a 5-year period. That was our initial request. And then the bond council and the town treasurer let us know that some of those things were not bondable. They are needs, but they're not over $10,000 of the maintenance type. So the figure, he figured that we could bond would be $1,352,000 approximately. So that's what we have that's on the warrant right now, okay, as far as a request. But both the selectmen and the advisory committee have pushed in the direction of doing one-year requests rather than a 5-year request. So
That's me, sorry.
the capital budget in the past asked us to do a 5-year plan, so we did. And there's basically a newly constituted capital budget committee, 2 new members, and 1 member who's on advisory, who's a carryover member. They haven't yet decided. They sort of like the idea of the 5-year plan, but we have to decide going forward what might be best for us. I think the 5-year plan is much more manageable going forward, but we can't swim upstream against all the different groups if they're going to recommend a 1-year budget. Now, I had people put together, Barbara and Ralph and Peter put together a 1-year plan, and you have a copy of that. And that's changed a bit because of, we put some things in there for security, but the 1-year request then would be $337,000. And we probably should listen to capital before we go forward, but I'd like to get some feedback from this committee. What are your thoughts as far as going with a 1-year plan or a 5-year plan? That's what we're looking at. So, I mean, we don't have to make that decision now. We can actually make that on town meeting floor, but it's much easier to go with the flow going forward with advisory's support, with capital support, and with the selectmen's support.
So is this different than what we talked about with selectmen, about going forward with a total 5-year amount?
Right, we break it up into 1-year requests.
Yeah, but we wouldn't have to go in front of them.
Yes, we would. We'd have to go
Every
back every
year.
single year.
So that was, I thought, what we weren't gonna do.
That was our suggestion not to do it. That was capital budget's original suggestion, not to do that.
No, but I
If
thought
if I might, as we were trying to build the relationship with the capital budget, and Frank, this was, I think, when I had asked you if you would, or maybe I nominated you to be on this committee. But prior to that, we were working really hard with the members of the Sherborn Capital Committee. And it was really at a very strong recommendation on their part that they wanted to be able to look at the 5-year plan. And based on the request, and it made a lot of sense to us that they wanted to do some long-range planning and that some of the debt service was coming to closure for the town and that they would be able to look further on down the road if they knew what was happening, what the school's needs would be. So that's where the whole idea of doing the planning actually came from Sherborn and from that request. So that's why we consulted with the people that we thought provided a level of expertise that would give us the data and the information. From that, and before there was the turnover in that leadership, we really were strongly encouraged to come up with a 5-year plan. So I think that the shift within personnel on that particular committee is what, Frank has kind of inherited what we were told to do, and now it seems as though there's some further thought, or perhaps some different people that are serving on the committee that are feeling that there may be a different way in which they could best move this forward. But Frank was absolutely correct when he came to us with the 5-year plan, because that was exactly what we had been asked to do. They didn't want us coming every year with a capital request. So, Frank, I very much appreciate you serving in your capacity and the work that you've done, because this is really pretty much the guidelines that I was given. And I think it was reiterated to you after you took your position, but I'm not sure, so.
Right. In the new capital committee, they could come out and say they support the 5-year plan. They really haven't spoken yet. They listened to us.
I don't know, yeah.
But, you know, advisory has made it very clear, at least some members of advisory made it very clear that they support the 1-year program. And the selectmen basically said it was probably more politically feasible to go for a smaller number each year. So I just want you to know where we are, and we don't have to make a final decision on that today, but I'd like to get people's feelings. And I think that you can pass something that advisory disagrees with, but it takes a lot more work, it takes a lot more effort, and sometimes is not successful. So
I think part of what they were concerned with is, so the region is going to come with $400,000, I think a $400,000 request for the air conditioning for Sherborn's share of the AC in the middle school, plus their capital request of, is that half of 120,000?
Half of 120.
Something like that.
122.
So there was basically a little bit of shock to see $1.3 million. I personally think it's important for us to present this to the town, but in terms of viability, you know, and getting a vote, is the 337, is that easier to swallow than the $1.3 million? I mean, it makes more sense to do it in 5 years, but you know, it just depends on what you can do at the town meeting. And I would just like to say that the non-bondable costs are about $180,000 for
Right.
5 years, which is basically painting walls and ceilings. And we broke that out, and it was $17,000 next year. Then it was 50 and 40. You know, it averages about $36,000 a year. Given it it's a very tight budget, I personally think it's difficult to ask the town to for $337,000 or ask people to vote for that if we haven't sort of found a way to pay for the non-bondable, the maintenance costs. Are there maintenance, basic maintenance built into the budget, or if we got to spend $20,000 on paint, that's extra?
No, there are some line items within the budget that plan just basically addressed, I think, the need. Some of those operational line items could cover, probably not the whole thing, but the painting and things such as that. We do that in-house already, but probably not to the degree that the capital plan has identified.
Okay.
So I think basically we have a dual plan going forward here, and probably share that, but I've already shared that with capital. We did share the 1-year possibility with them, and do that also, you know, with the selectmen and with advisory, and, you know, it might be best, depending on what their recommendation is, to go with their recommendation.
Does it make sense to have a plan C for, I mean, if, depending on who shows up for the meeting, if 337 doesn't get voted for it, then to have kind of a bottom line of what we need to have just to be able to alter it on the
Well, I think
floor?
that could be altered, you know, anytime. It could be altered right after the advisory meeting, it could be altered on town meeting floor. But with the 1-year plan, there are certain things, huge chunks that you could take a look at and decide, is it this year or next year? But I think what we talked about is that what we're spending over 20 years is about what Dover's going to spend over 20 years on their school, which is only 12 years old. Okay, they got the same recommendation, so it's not like this is that much more. And so if we were looking in a different direction and say, look at a new school, which it seemed like with this person's recommendation that we could get away without spending that money, we'd be spending $24 to $30 million, and then in 10 years, we'd still have to spend another $5 or $6 million over 20 years to keep it up. So it seemed like we were going the most economical direction here as far as this is concerned. But it's going to take constant input because parts of this building are 55 years old, so we're not very far from being adequate in a good learning space to being a shabby learning space. Okay, when a building's that old, you have to keep it up or you're going to have a facility that you're not really going to be proud of. So anyway, we can, as we meet with capital budget again, we can see what their recommendation is. I just want you to be aware of where we are in this process.
So the deadline again is just town meeting as far as
Right, but
figuring out what to do.
But basically, I think when we go for Bloody Saturday, we should have a direction.
So we'll hear from capital before then.
Well, I hope to meet with than before that, yes.
Cause it's like 2 weeks?
And the 337, I mean, what is that in relation to that big plan, the 20-year evaluation that was done?
Well,
What about those numbers?
well,
Where did it-
basically, the 5-year numbers came exactly from the plan. Okay, the 1-year plan cuts out some of those things that were in the first couple of years. It cuts out some things that might be impacted by the road. Okay, we cut out the curbing because if the Pine Hill Road gets funded by the state, that would pay for the curbing or disturb the curbing, so we put that off. Okay, and some things that were added, we put some security things in, which we might discuss later.
Okay.
And that would also impact the 20-year study. The 20-year study really didn't have any security items in it, so that would be impacted by those considerations also. So I think that we just have to give you a report at our next meeting and see where we are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember, do we have to vote on the capital?
Basically, you already voted for, I believe, the 5-year plan, okay?
1.5 million?
Right, the 1.5. And so basically, anything we cut down from that would be,
Okay. So you don't need, I mean, we don't have to meet to vote before you meet with advisory?
well, I mean, you could if you so chose, you know, so you could say, we would support in general a 5-year plan or a 1-year plan, if you wanted to decide to do that at this time.
Well, right now, we've supported the 5-year plan, so
Yes.
it's just, you're just gonna figure out what
But
to do the
we,
first year.
when is our meeting in April?
Our next meeting as
Yeah.
a group?
Or is that
No,
one of the months we skipped?
Yeah, we meet,
May 14th.
we have joint meetings with
Okay, well then,
this month, so.
if necessary, maybe you might have to grant authorization for either plan, depending on, you know, the input of capital and advisory.
Okay. All right, well, just let us know, and then if we have to schedule something, we will.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Any other subcommittee reports or discussions, anything else? Okay, let's move on to academic excellence and the principal's report.
I'll hit just a few salient highlights. I wanted to recognize our outstanding kindergarten teachers for their presentation to our new kindergarten parents. We had kindergarten information night a week ago Tuesday, and we greeted the families of 48 students who were scheduled to be registered officially in late April. The kindergarten teachers did a presentation on curriculum and overview of the kindergarten program. We have a long-term sub in for one of our kindergarten teachers who is the proud mother of twins that complement her family. I also wanted to recognize, I didn't write it here, but I also wanted to recognize officially Monique Veal is the METCO director that was hired for the school system, the METCO coordinator, who has been a breath of energy and vivacious tenacity. She's been with us 3 weeks now, and she's forging great relationships with our staffs and our students and their families.
How do you spell her last name?
Veal, V-E-A-L.
And it's hyphen. What's her?
She's actually Monique Marshall.
Marshall hyphen Veal.
V-E-A-L-E.
Something related to capital, but with no price tag associated. I wanted to just give an update that the rep from the Sherborn Energy Conservation Committee was in our building a week or so ago, walking our building with a lighting vendor. They spent a good 3.5 hours in the building and on the grounds. As you know, there's a sizable grant that will be replacing our lighting to make us energy efficient. There's a little bit more money available than anticipated, and they're hopeful that they can stretch the replacement of the actual ballast and lighting to include some of the covers in, like in the D wing, some of the lighting covers are cracked and, what's the word you use? Shabby. Some of the lighting fixtures are shabby. So they're hopeful that they can roll that into part of the energy grant. The good news, bad news. They can't add lighting. They can only replace lighting. So I was hopeful, trying to appeal that some of our lighting that some of the front of our building, for example, that's not well lit on the exterior. They can't add lighting. They can only replace existing lighting. So, but they'll be coming in with the final project details soon, and we look forward to that taking place over the summer. And I'll go right into, with regard to kindergarten improvement, the impact of full-day kindergarten. I wanted to talk a little bit, just some highlights in meeting with the kindergarten team and observing and analyzing the program improvements from a .8 kindergarten program to that of a full-time kindergarten program. Some salient, the teachers all have very positive feedback and are very complimentary about the positive impact on children. As you know, the Common Core standards have added additional and higher expectations for kindergarten students with regard to relevance and rigor. And the full-day kindergarten program has created time to teach these standards at a developmentally appropriate pace and pedagogy. So we're now having 5 full days of literacy instruction, which was not the case in the past. In the past, there were 30-minute math blocks. There are now 45 to 60-minute math blocks. There's an increase in science and social studies instruction. There's additional time built in, we keep using the lingo RTI, but response to intervention. Kids that aren't making effective progress in a particular skill area in math or literacy, that need extra intervention, targeted skill instruction, extra time in small group explicit instruction, are able to get that, and that's built into, in part with the kindergarten teaching assistants and in part with some of our intervention staff, grant-funded intervention staff. There is an additional recess, which the teachers absolutely value, not just for play, but for social and motor development. And comment that students have adjusted well, exhibiting stamina and strong levels of engagement throughout the day. The teachers have found that they haven't needed an additional rest period in the afternoon, which is interesting, coming from a district where I previously worked with full-day kindergarten. That rest time was observable. We have one little guy who tends to doze off while he's waiting for his afternoon school bus. But in fairness to him, he's one of our students from Boston, so he does get up way before the crack of dawn. But other than that, the kids and the teachers are maintaining high levels of energy and engagement.
That's because they're junior raters.
The math standard in kindergarten is to have good number sense through the number 5. And so I'm visiting a math center the other day, and the kids are bundling. Dr. Brown, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why is that important? They all know my job is to be nosy about teaching and learning. And he said, what are you doing? We're bundling our teen numbers. Didn't you ever bundle teen numbers when you were in school? I said, yeah, probably in 2nd grade. So just a little dipstick of well exceeding the kindergarten standards. And unless you have questions, I'll stop there. I know we've been loquacious this evening.
Great, thank you. Okay, outstanding teachers, anything that they want to?
They're all outstanding. My apologies to school committee, but we just couldn't muster a summary with the back-to-back meetings that we've had. So we'll get back into our routine hopefully after tomorrow.
Okay.
Thursday. We'll give our
Same with the status of appropriations.
Okay, and anything more on the budget then? I think,
I
it was
think,
down here again.
You know, just a point of clarification so that people understand, it's the three budgets together and being back to back with the issues that we've had to deal with this year and not having the numbers to be able to project and bring forward has really made a tremendous amount of extra money. Extra money. I'd like it to be extra money, of extra time that's been consumed at the central office. So my apologies to you all. We'll get back into our routine very shortly. And hopefully after tomorrow, we'll be in a better place with all three of the budgets.
Okay, great, thank you. And anything on technology that we wanted to discuss tonight? Who's on the technology committee? Frank, right?
that might be
Okay,
just
keep
carried
going.
forward.
Keep going, huh?
That may be carried forward just as part of what the strategic goals. Does anyone have any input on technology?
Oh, on no, well, Frank's on the technology committee, right?
Well-
Anything you need to bring up, or?
I mean,
we'll keep-
one
we'll keep-
thing that I sense from all of you is the fact that in the future, the replacement for the MCAS is gonna have to be taken online. So
Yeah,
we're gonna have to think about having enough,
Yeah.
you know, instruments, iPads, laptops, whatever it is, for every child that's gonna take the test to do that. So, aside from using it for education, that they're gonna have to be tested. I guess things like, you know, the GRE are already taken online in some of those tests, so that these are gonna have to be the same way. And they're also looking at, you know, the way other communities are rolling out the computers, like Wellesley, a year ago, did a 5th grade, they gave them all iPads. And coming up, every 5th grader is going to have an iPad. And the way they're doing it financially is, if they can afford it, they are charging them, it's not really that bad a deal, they're charging $130 a year. And that includes all the software they need to have on it. At the end of 4 years, they own it. So, and if I guess, suppose if a person got free lunch or assistance, then, you know, they would help them out. But anyway, so we'll be taking a look at the way these other communities are making use of these machines, because I can't see, I mean, first of all, we can't afford a lot of them, but if we could, we should buy beyond what we have as far as professional development or plans to make the best use of them. So we shouldn't just have, you know, nice doorstops, they should be something that everybody uses if we get them.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that I think that when researching other towns, it'd be really interesting to see if you can find some anecdotal information, not just what the school puts forth. Because just because you have it, I think that a lot of schools, if they put out requests for the funding, they're gonna have to say, it's the best thing ever. But I know anecdotally from students in Hopkinton in the middle school and families who think that it's not been, it hasn't added any value.
Yeah.
It's just added cost.
And thank you so much, Anne, for bringing that point up, because one of the things that I really celebrate with Dover Sherborn is that, and Steve was with me in California when Apple was generous enough to have us go to this huge leadership conference. It was very, very impressive. My greatest concern with the executives was, what is your vision? I really do feel as though staying focused on the teaching and the learning, and also bringing in the technology as the effective tools that they can be, and not just randomly buying it. But if we do have some group, such as, I think it was the primary group here in Pine Hill, kindergarten on handwriting maybe 2 years ago, they said, we now need smart boards. And we weren't going to go in that direction for our primary. But that was the choice. And because it was grassroots and the teachers had done their research and they really felt as though it was important for instruction and for the children's learning, the movement forward, I think, was a wise investment. But I think, and I really do appreciate the work that Stephen and Jean Conkey and now Diane thank you, Steve, have done together in trying to develop a very solid technology department that is focused on instruction and learning, and that are also reaching out to the liaisons at each school and trying to bring us together. It has been a laborious task, but one that I kudos to all three of you.
The whole team's been great.
And know that on behalf of Pine Hill, we submitted about $50,000 worth of grant requests to DSEF, and about close to $30,000 of that was technology grant. So we'll see.
Barbara's going to rewire the school, I believe.
We need just a little bit of upgrading. And thank you for feeding the quest of the kindergarten teachers. They've appealed to me. They want a one-to-one model in kindergarten. I said, where does such a model exist with 5-year-olds? Washington State, we found one.
They're resourceful. I like that about them.
Okay, now we're going on to the superintendent's update. Not the report, it was like superintendent update.
I think probably the hottest item in the update is definitely the work that's being done on the budget. The other area is one that you probably are not seeing as much of Stephen as you normally do, because he has been the anchor on moving forward with some of the administrative hiring processes. So we've done a little bit of switching off there. There are times of which he has been, actually quite a few times of which he has really been the anchor on facilitating that process, and I have been kind of the home team, being able to work with Christine on the budget. So I think from the central administration, we've been doing a pretty decent job of trying to move a lot of agendas forward. Steve, do you want to comment any further on that?
We've spent about 10 hours over the past 2 days in the high school headmaster search committee interviews from 12 to 5 each of the past 2 days. We identified 6 candidates out of a initial pool of 45 to interview. So the interviews have now concluded, and we will resume next week with some deliberations, and we're going to begin some real forensic reference checking on some of the folks that we're interested in looking at further. But before, we're going to engage in that kind of reference background checking before we even discuss the notion of having those folks visit our system spend a day and have us have a portion of the committee go and visit their sites. So there's just a desire to sort of invert some of the steps in the process. And we'll kick off very soon the assistant superintendent search. We've concluded the METCO search, and we've concluded the middle school assistant headmaster search. So
It's moving. Are you on that schedule? Are you following that schedule pretty well?
fairly well. So I know that we have a representative from each school committee for the assistant superintendent search committee. So we'll be putting together. I've pulled an appeal out to all the tech and accept member districts so that we can take a look at the assistant superintendent job description, which is what we've done for each of the searches, to really put together a thoughtful process in looking at what the job responsibilities are. It has certainly changed since I was hired 4 years ago. It's changed. So that's part and parcel of the process. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, special item, the school choice program. This is something we vote on, right?
Yeah, we vote on this every year.
I have some questions.
As do I.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Right.
Sorry.
In terms of opening up this, does this only then open us up for Sherborn Schools, Pine Hill, to students from the area around Sherborn?
No, it opens up your admissions to people that can apply, and you are bound to accept all that apply that you can accommodate based on space.
But we're not opening the region, we're just opening with
You're
this
just
vote.
opening your school
Pine Hill,
district.
so, okay.
Pine Hill.
And we're opening it up to all the schools within any certain distance, or how is that
Well,
criteria?
usually there is a radius with which you draw, and I said, but remember too that you are opening to all students
Okay. And
in those communities.
If if we should do this, and should we allow students to enter our school, I presume the student brings with them the income base that.
No, the only tuition that we are allocated if we open that is $5,000 per student. So it is not cost effective for you, because each student that comes into the district, you are receiving $5,000 per student, as opposed to the equivalent of what you are currently spending.
Can you select for specific grades?
No,
You can't. You can't just say, I mean,
no.
because we clearly have capacity in some grades.
But you can't do that. It is based upon space available. So you would have to open it up. It'd be kind of like a lottery, Greg, that you would open it up, and if you had, like, you might identify, okay, I think we have space at this particular grade level. It would be open to all grade levels until your capacity was met.
Who determines what the capacity is?
Well, we would have to have policy written on that.
Well, we have a policy for.
Yes, you do.
So you can accept them incoming at any grade level if you were to get older applicants, but you own them. In Natick, we were a school choice district. Then you own them.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
You own them. And the only criteria that you can use to accept or reject their application is their disciplinary record, not their academic record or
And if
special education.
there were special education needs, those costs are paid for by.
Us. Yep. If they choice in and we accept them, they're ours. And the problem that we would also have is that the region has not opened up their school districts. So at the end of 5th grade, they would then have to seek education elsewhere.
So why would anybody do this? If you could make,
Well, that's why we have
well,
it.
if you could make, if you have capacity and your fixed costs are covered, you could make $5,000 per student. But if you've got to take all the ancillary special ed costs.
And you never know that.
And you can't discriminate
right.
as to, you know,
Okay.
So it is a revenue source, but it's
It has its ups and downs.
So why did Natick
Yeah.
decide to make that decision, and what were the benefits or the drawbacks?
when that district made that decision, it was facing funding cuts probably about 5 years ago, and it helped us avoid teacher layoffs.
I would also share that when you're looking at that as a funding source, it is a dangerous slope to go down where you become dependent upon choice money.
Yep.
And quite frankly, I learned that from experience in a previous school district of which we had good choice numbers, good revenue. We were dependent upon that for our budget. However, when the new school opened down the road and we lost those numbers, it had a tremendous impact on our budget. So there are a lot of variables that you need to look at, but the one that would concern me is that you cannot discriminate as to who you, once you open to choice, as Barbara said, you can look at disciplinary records, but that's it. You may not look at academic performance, you may not look at any type of additional assistance that a student needs to have.
And the district that I mentioned had a significantly lower expenditure per pupil than what we lay out. So, you know, to coop $5,000 when you're spending $9,000 per pupil wasn't a huge discrepancy. For us, cooping $5,000 would be a huge discrepancy based on what we lay out per pupil.
You'd almost be better off closing a wing to cover your fixed costs than taking that on.
Okay, so do I hear a motion to withdraw from the school choice program for the 2013-2014 school year?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, enrollments. We need to review that. Anything new? No? And then, future business. So for the next meeting on May 14th, I did jot down MCAS disparity, girls versus boys. Any other topics that came up that we should add?
I don't know, do we have to talk here on when to set up a working session?
For the
That date.
for budget, yeah. I think by then we'll have already maybe done that or set it up or, talk about it here?
Not for this year, I mean for future, like sit down to talk about like long-term
Budget planning
like budget planning and.
Yeah. We can put that on the agenda. I would think that we'd have something scheduled way before that. At least start talking about that.
Well,
Can we
let's,
I know
Can we
you,
get through?
no, I know, no, I don't mean like right away, but,
right.
as a follow-up to the budget, because,
Let's put it down, if we've talked about it, then maybe skip right over it.
It's a
Okay.
safety net, so
Yeah.
if we don't catch up with it, it's
Workshop.
here on the.
anything else anybody can think of?
When are the elections, so will the elections have taken place?
It's
Other-
May the 14th, which is on the day of our next meeting here,
school
which is a
committee.
problem because
Oh, yeah.
there's two of us and,
You can change it, couldn't you?
Sure.
I didn't realize that, okay.
Okay, so we need to go ahead and make a date change here?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, actually, where were you planning to meet? Because they vote here.
Right, so wouldn't
Well, I guess we wouldn't be, well,
we'd meet at the school,
I
but
guess
But we
this would
changed
not
the
be
date.
appropriate for us to come, would it, on election day?
be presumptuous, right?
Can we have it
certain
the day
people.
after?
Hmm?
Maybe we should meet on the Thursday.
Thursday after, right?
Yeah, so that'll be the 15th, 16th.
So that would mean that if you don't get reelected, this is your last meeting. Right? Nice work, Kingsley.
After my vote
was just
today, maybe
thinking
that's
that.
the situation.
Oh my God. Okay, so we'll try to
No,
reschedule.
actually, that's the 16th is the spring band concert.
Hang on, let me pull this.
I have that too. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And everyone should be
All
there.
right, with you there. All right.
So we have to use up 2 years.
Should be positive.
You still got 2 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'll get to more.
Still, I feel like,
Okay. So
It would be May
what's the
12th.
term? I feel like,
Sunday,
Sunday, try the 15th.
regional administrators, looks like that might work.
How about the 15th?
Wednesday the 15th.
It's a Wednesday.
May 15th?
But,
Yeah, we can put it down and unless anybody has something already important.
Yeah, you've got a band concert at the middle school that Thursday, so that's, may affect some people. Monday is out.
All right, let me,
Everyone should be at
That's
the band
okay.
concert.
why don't we
Yeah,
look at,
so does Wednesday the 15th work for everybody?
So far,
Yep.
I'll put it on the
Yeah.
calendar.
Ray,
on
is
the
that
calendar.
okay for you?
If
Okay.
Frank,
Yeah, so
Frank
far,
Hess?
looks good, yeah.
that works? Okay, Ann?
Yeah, got it in.
Okay,
It-
I'm gonna
it
have,
may not be an issue. It may be an issue.
it better be an issue.
Let's hope.
Okay, so May 15th, we will get that change posted. And thank you all for that.
so, now we need to poll for executive session, right? Am I headed the,
Oh. That's Frank, yeah? Yeah, the security.
So I move we go into executive session.
Second.
maybe I'll vote for,
You want to pose?
Just go and.
say yes,
Yes.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.